Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge, where for the first time ever, all four of the stocks we're talking about had unusual activity. You want to know which those were? Stay tuned. Bang! Well, Pete, you got a Super Bowl hangover, do you?
I kind of do. Anyway, I'll tell you what.
I doubt it.
I had a guy hanging over, I'll tell you that. But anyway, well, I already talked about that beforehand, so that's enough about that. But yeah, I'll tell you what. Interesting, John, for sure, because it was an interesting day, interesting game, and is it the first one to go to overtime, or is it? I can't remember what that was, but I don't remember an overtime game in a Super Bowl ever. So I think it was.
Nor do I, Pete. And I didn't know that playoff football is different because of that rule. Like you said, the 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs, several players said they didn't know that the overtime thing was different. And the only thing I'll point out here, folks, is it doesn't matter if they knew or not, because even though they're out there for the coin toss and so forth, it ain't their call. The only call they have is heads or tails. Other than that, Shanahan or Reed are the ones that made that decision. It's not on the players, so they just verbalize what the coaches told them to say.
And John, I'll say this. Actually, a lot of the time, the coaches have their own opinion on heads or tails. So they don't even always have that. I remember Lou Holtz. He said, look, I've done this many times. You should always answer tails. It's like, okay, all right. Who do you want, Pete? Tails. Whatever.
By the way, folks, when an NFL regular season game is tied after regulation is ended, the game enters overtime. And they do. I think a lot of us, Pete, understand the difference. A Super Bowl or playoff game cannot end in a tie. That makes all the sense in the world. Cannot end in a tie, because obviously how would you advance to the next stage if it was playoffs? And if it's the Super Bowl, obviously you need a champ. You're not going to have a tie. Right. So we all knew that rule existed. But how does the NFL address the rest of the rules, and are they different? They are, and we'll tell you about it later in the week, because we got a lot of stuff to cover today on the Rebel's Edge. He is Pete Najarian, of course. I'm Jon Najarian. Jared Wenkman is doing all the panels that you see over on the right side of the screen, the ticker at the bottom of the screen, and handling the video and audio. So if anything screws up, blame him.
For sure.
Because we will.
Sorry, Jared.
Let's start off, Pete, with the macro minute.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make it short and sweet. Jamie Dimon says the U.S. debt is the most predictable crisis in history. And then Fed Chair Powell, Pete, came out and said that it's time to have an adult conversation about fiscal responsibility. Do you think maybe now that we're at 34 trillion, they're starting to think that 120% of GDP is not such a good thing as far as our debt?
It's a sudden decision, John. Anyway, I'm with you.
Sudden.
In terms of the macro minute, John, I think that is very pertinent. Obviously, anytime Jamie Dimon speaks, a lot of us listen to it because we know the guy. We understand his intelligence and his read-through. And this one's not even at all that difficult of a read-through. I will say this, that U.S. national debt that you're talking about, $34.19 trillion, that's a real number. How about U.S. credit card debt at $1.1 trillion, just to throw a little something else out there too, John? So there is a lot going on, and that people are stretched and continue to do so. But at some point, none of us know exactly when, but that will be a problem. And I think Jamie Dimon is spot on.
Yep, I do too. And the more he and the Fed chairs actually talk about it, they're not the ones that can address it except in conversation. But we've got a bunch of buffoons in Congress, and I won't even comment on the president, because the Congress has to pass something and then get it to the president. The president can't just wave a magic wand, no matter who the president is. So it's Congress that is screwing the pooch here, Pete. Let's talk for a second about fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures, frozen concentrated orange juice. Yeah, in other words, what Mr. Beeks told Duke and Duke was going to happen. Well, it's collapsing right now. It's down 15% in a week, Pete, because we hit 390 something a week ago, and today we were trading under 340. So I'm saying that 15,000 pound contract, because that's how many pounds of oranges we're talking about, it's not moving limit, but it's moving half of limit today, Pete.
Well, and that is very interesting. And I'll point this one out, John. You and I oftentimes talk about energy one way or the other, whether it's oil or natural gas. And by the way, oil keeps going back up, testing that 77 level. Meanwhile, you look at nat gas, all it does is go down. But I just thought it would be interesting to point out something that you and I have talked about a few times before, and I think it's worth revisiting as long as that's the case. But coffee, how about that? It's been rocketing to the upside, John. If you go back to October, it was trading about 145. Now here we are, we're pushing against 200 once again. Not quite there right now. We've been there, we've pulled back, but this move to the upside looks a heck of a lot like a tech stock or maybe a semiconductor or something like that, John, because it's literally bottom left, upper right, and it's off to the races. But just keep an eye on that. Many of us are coffee drinkers, so this is something that you definitely should keep your eyes on.
It's definitely something that all of us pay for in one way or another, virtually, Pete, because this is how a lot of us wake up in the morning. Yep. Certainly how I get ready for the gym early. I got to have at least a big cup like, well, here's my big cup, Pete. I got to have at least that much coffee to get going in the morning. All right, let's talk about Joby, because this is vertical lift takeoff electric vehicles, Pete. So in other words, for air taxis. And they just did a big deal with Dubai. And Dubai seems to be one of the places on earth where they make things happen, Pete. You know, whether it's building the tallest buildings in the world, whether it's, you know, anything that's going to make people want to come and visit, Dubai is doing that. And so we had unusual activity, folks, in this name, Joby. And it hasn't exploded through the upside, but there you see it, Joby Aviation. That's a picture on the side of what those air taxis look like. This is a big deal. And getting a deal like this done and knowing that back in November, somebody was really betting on a deal like this being done, that's pretty interesting.
I think it's really interesting. And they went all the way out to April, John. So, just remember that, folks. We talk about unusual option activity all the time. Probably 80% of it expires within about 3 weeks, and probably, going out to April, maybe a couple of percent. So interesting to see that they actually slid all the way out there to April. They bought something that's at the time 5 months out. That's pretty unusual. We've got shorts in there, John, that are pretty deep. We're talking about a 10% short interest here. Got a great balance sheet. There's a lot of reasons to kind of like this one. Is the squeeze a possibility? I would say it absolutely is, given that 10%. I'd also say you've got a little bit of cash burn to keep an eye on, but this is a company that's been as high as 12. Here we are. We're not even halfway there, barely halfway there. We're just over 6. I think this is a name that potentially has room to the upside, especially the excitement that this isn't that far away now, John. They're talking about 2025 at these things getting out there and starting to move around. I think that's going to be fascinating as all get out, but it's going to be mostly, obviously, over there in what part of the world? Dubai, right? I think that's where they've settled in on their first few. So that'll be interesting. But if it's successful, it'll be a lot more than just Dubai.
Yeah. And think of, folks, a drone being lifted by those spinning blades, but it's all electric. So there's a lot less sound and certainly a lot less pollution, at least at the site. All right, Pete, let's talk about CymaBay, not eBay, CymaBay, because CymaBay is going to get taken out by Gilead. And this is a very interesting one because it gives Gilead a real handle, or a real, maybe a significant edge in liver disease and so forth, liver treatments, because they already had a pretty good head start, Pete, and now they're taking somebody out for another $4 billion. So pretty big deal. And yes, we did have unusual activity, folks, in CymaBay as well. There it is. C3.AI stock was up 24% earlier today. They were buying the March 25 calls with the stock at 24, basically. Well, though the right to buy it at 25 is worth at least, when the stock's trading 32, is worth at least $7 now, folks. So how's that one working out for you?
Yeah. We talk about these things all the time. It can be amazing, and that's a great example of it, John. It's just outrageous. $4.3 billion acquisition. That's been sizable, and we've been seeing more and more of this, whether it's energy or looking over in the pharmaceuticals, biotech world. We're seeing more and more of this, acquisitions that we're seeing. This one is really interesting because of this, John. First 90 minutes of the day, 49 million shares changing hands. That's normally 1.6 million a day. So it's pretty impressive. The FDA apparently already pretty excited about what's going on behind the scenes. I think CymaBay is going to be an interesting acquisition. A lot of people think it's maybe a little too much money, John. I'm not so sure about that, but either way, this is going to be very, very interesting. And once again, Gilead, who's always had a great balance sheet, and for whatever reason, their performance has not been up there with a lot of the other names. And I can't tell you exactly why. I'm not really sure. I've been following this name forever, but maybe this is just one of those acquisitions that certainly gives them a little bit more room, a little bit of more exposure to the upside, I think, in the future.
Yeah, it's a big deal, certainly for any shareholder in CymaBay, Pete. And it's probably cements Gilead's position as one of the companies for go-to liver products and so forth. All right. Now, we told you we had 4 today, folks, and we had to dump Monday.com to squeeze this one in, but I think you'll think it's worth it because ARM Holdings exploded today by better than 30 some odd % to the upside. Now, Pete and I talked about it last week when it was moving to the upside. And we said, hey, we had unusual activity. And again, we had it last week as well, Pete. Well, now it traded all the way to 164 today. 164, which is a huge move out of this stock, Pete, had the unusual activity again, even today in this one. But boy, the ones they were buying a week and 2 weeks ago, Pete, really just a phenomenal return. And if any of you had those, well, because it closed Friday at 120, traded to 164 today, $44 on $120 stock. Bang.
And before that, John, going into earnings, it was a $77 stock that suddenly pops up to 113, 120, somewhere in that range. And we've just seen day after day after day, and now more options again. This is one wild ride. I'll tell you what, John, here's another one where when you want to look at volumes, how about this? It averages 9 million a day, and that's going back to last week where it got padded pretty good because of some of the moves that it had made post-earnings and so forth. 67 million shares trading today. So the volumes are there to support a lot of this, a lot of chasing, I think, going on as well. Anybody who is part of the shorts, they're not feeling it too good today, John. And that might have been why we hit 164 and then had that big pullback, because the panic finally got to them from 77 to 164. I think the panic would get to any of us. But if you were short and you were holding on and you finally said, you know what, buy it. That's what they do. And that was the end of it. And now they're starting to pull back. So we'll see in the next couple of days. We'll definitely have to keep an eye on what the short interest was and where it is now, because I think that's a big player in this.
Yeah. And Pete, you and I heard Kevin O'Leary talk about making a horrible trade like that once. This is not me ripping Kevin. Kevin did this publicly in front of 1,000 people at one of our conferences, folks.
Yeah.
Was talking about riding a loser all the way up and then all the way back down. And my gosh, that is those people that can do that have a lot of guts, but they also probably haven't traded many options, because there's a better way to be short the stock through a put option rather than shorting the stock and having to chase it to the upside. You buy a put, that's all you can lose, folks. is what you paid for the put. All right, Pete, we have 4 today. So the 4th is AI. This is one that Pete had, and he was saying, hey, why is this one not on the list? Because yes, we had unusual activity in AI. This is one of the top companies in that space. And there you see we had 2 different trades, both of them in February. And one of them was with the stock at 25. One was with the stock at 28. And then we got the space shuttle there because it is exploding to the upside, Pete. Look at that. Another 7%. It's over $30. It's like, bang, what a great trade.
Well, and when you look at their balance sheet, John, I think a lot of stocks like this one, anything in AI, a lot of the time I think people are looking at it and they say, that's a no touch because of this reason or that reason. And I am one of those people. However, you have to always look. And I look at AI. You look at their position, John, and what they've got cash to debt, and you feel pretty daggone comfortable about this company. It's not completely leveraged out. It's not this. It's not that. They do have some shorts, which if you're on the bullish side and you suddenly see something very similar to what you and I were just talking about with ARM Holdings, but you look at this one as well. John, the shorts in here are 32 to 42%. Oh. I mean, think about that. I don't remember, other than those crazy memes early on, I can't really remember shorts in this sort of size. I mean, usually 10% seems like a lot. 15 or 20 is huge. This is 32 to 42% short interest. That's why it gets kind of some of the moves that we have seen. And by the way, if you go back in time and take a look at where this stock was in terms of the last year or so, and you look at some of the highs, it doesn't necessarily mean 31's enough. This thing could get a little bit higher. Doesn't mean you should be a pig. Don't be a pig. But just know that if you look back, you'd see that this thing has been higher than where it is right now. And so the potential is there. And tell me this, when's the last time you didn't hear somebody talking about AI, John? I mean, everything is AI, right? Even Caterpillar brought out the AI term a week or so ago. Everybody's using it, but this one, it's part of the name and everything.
And folks, if you'd like to learn about how to perhaps trade options, well, that's one of the things that we can do over at Market Rebellion. But we also have a free book. So if you'd like to get a free copy, if you'd like to claim your free copy of our book, kind of a great way to get started. It's the #1 business book in 2024. You could check it out by going to itsnotanoption.com. That's the title of the book. And if you go to itsnotanoption.com, you can claim your free book on us. It's a great way to get started. And then maybe you might even sign up for some education and or subscriptions on our website. Great way to go. All right. Well, Pete, let's take a look maybe at, I think there was a game that was played last night. It might have lived up to the hype. Although the first half probably was frustrating for a lot of fans, I think the overall game was pretty interesting, even though apparently the Zebras think that it's okay if Kansas City holds on every single pass play, because they did. But, you know, I'm not bitter. I'm just saying, if you look with a neutral eye and you look at how many times, for instance, 71 was getting called for holding, Pete, versus how many times did the Kansas City line get called for holding? And then you see some guys basically getting tackled as they're coming after Mahomes. Anyway, this is this overtime drive by Mahomes with a lot of his magic.
This was magic. Yeah.
What do we got? Handoff. Oh, it's gravy. It's gravy.
Gravy.
That was a designed run. That wasn't a scramble on that one. That was a designed run.
Call it.
3rd and 1.
That kid, I'll tell you what, he was angry on the sideline too. It wasn't just Travis Kelce. But look at
Can he do it?
Can he do it?
Back to back. Hands it to Kels. Kels.
To Kels.
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 Everybody acts like they're his best friend, Kels.
Yeah.
For the win.
For the win,
For
Pete.
the win. Just like that.
Just like that.
Did they just end it? They just ended it.
You know what? You know what stands out about that whole thing? What do you got there? You got the overtime magic. You know what stands out the most for me, John, on that drive? Think about this. You had Patrick Mahomes, who we all know is great, right? I mean, he really is special. And is he Tom Brady? It's not fair to even compare. He's not got enough time yet. But yesterday I was looking at his stats, John, in the first 7 years versus Brady's, and he destroys Brady. So for the people who don't think he has a chance, right now he's already passed him and then some. In terms of touchdowns, far more. Interceptions, far less. Yardage, far more. So, and I'm a guy who loves Tom Brady and loves what he did and did it for a long time. But I can tell you, when you actually look at their first couple of 7 years, you're looking at something that's pretty daggone impressive. And I guess you and I were kind of kicking around. What makes a dynasty? I think they're already kind of halfway on their way to a dynasty. This is a team that has been going to the Super Bowl, going to the big game. They've won how many? 2, I think, recent, right? 2 back-to-back, 3 total.
Two back-to-back, yeah. 2 back-to-back.
Yeah. So not so bad. I think that for the 49ers, that's a heck of a football team. They got nothing to be embarrassed about. I think Purdy was unbelievable. The kid really had great numbers when you look at him. He came through when he needed to. He got hit a lot. I mean, he got hit a lot. That offensive line, to your point, John, they're very good, but they can't get him all day. And unfortunately, Purdy was getting hit a lot. You could see his arm getting hit and this and that. So a lot of it wasn't his inaccuracy. It was him getting beat up back there pretty good. And, I thought that he played a magical game. I mean, you look at the two of them number to number, they're not that different. They're very similar, actually.
And the first half numbers were spectacularly in Purdy's favor.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, I thought it was a fun Super Bowl. I thought it was great. It was the back and forth. It was close. I mean, think about this, John. The guys in Vegas kept saying it's about a point, maybe a point and a half. It'd been as much as 2.5, but it was closer to 1.5, 1 point throughout this whole thing. Just imagine how close this game was. The fact that it went to overtime. The fact that the guy got an extra point block. I mean, all of those factors that go into the fact of how we got this overtime game. It's just amazing sometimes. It really is. And I thought it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the game. I think I didn't look yet, John, so I'll have to do that for us tomorrow just to see what the numbers look like, unless you'd looked. But I would expect it had a pretty good rating and some numbers that might be record breaking, especially with the Taylor Swift effect. Whether you like it or don't like it, it's there. And obviously everything else that goes along with Super Bowl. Did you like the halftime? Did you like the way they did it? That's why I asked you that.
No. We'll talk about that tomorrow, Pete.
Okay.
Because I thought that was terrible. Usher has more hits than that. And the only one that people knew was dun, 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 dun. And, we all know that song. Yeah. We all know that one. Yeah. We all know that. But the rest of his catalog, if you will, they didn't pick the good songs by him to do out there. Anyway, we'll talk about it tomorrow. But you said dynasty, and I'll say as long as Mahomes is there, yes, because he is the difference. They can plug a guy in as good as Travis Kelce is. They can plug a guy into his spot if he retires. They can plug a wide receiver in just like they did with the Cheetah. And it doesn't matter. Yeah, they'll drop a few more passes than the Cheetah did. But other than that, it's Mahomes. It's Mahomes. It's Mahomes. It's Mahomes. And Pete, I'll point out one other thing. I was listening to Julian Edelman, wide receiver, slot back, if you will, for the Patriots. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about when they would work out in the offseason with Brady in March. And he said, I'm out there at his place in California and we're working out. And I say to him, I said, we got our third Super Bowl, man. Are you going after Montana? And Brady looked at him, stared right at him and said, I'm going after Jordan. And just think, Pete, he was there 8 times. He won 6 times they won. Lost twice, I think, to the Giants, Pete. I mean, I can't believe, like when that guy pinned the ball to his head and
Oh, yeah.
everything like
Yep.
that. But anyway, let's go on. Otherwise, we'll just keep rambling on it. But we'll talk about Usher tomorrow.
Sure. Absolutely. All right. So what's next, John? And here's what's next. So you look to next year and you look right to Vegas and you say, all right, who is number one, number two going into next year into the Super Bowl? Well, I know this will shock you, John, but San Francisco's number one, Kansas City's number two, and then the rest of them, Baltimore, Buffalo, Detroit, the Bengals, Dallas, Philadelphia. So the usual suspects are all back in there as far as that. And you never know. I mean, it could be kind of interesting. It's always fun if somebody else pops in there. Detroit certainly is that team for this year and now for next year, but I think there's somebody that they're missing that might get in there. Maybe it's Jacksonville or somebody like that. I'm not sure, but should be interesting. John, then we've got free agency, March 13th. Then you've got the combine, February 26th through March 4th. And then you get the draft, April 25th and 27th. Oh, by the way, I mentioned Detroit. It's in Detroit. So there's a lot in front of us already. And it's, you're always looking for what's next. The NFL is 24/7. We got to look up those ratings, John, because I find it really, really interesting. But the other thing I find interesting, and I'm going to throw this one to you. First pick in the NFL draft is the Chicago Bears are on the clock. What do you do with the pick?
First of all, I bluff my way about the quarterback, and I end up trading down, and I get either the wide receiver Rome from Washington, Pete, or Marvin Harrison Jr. Those are the two guys I want if I'm the Chicago Bears. You give Justin Fields those targets or targets similar to they can get one of those for sure. And if they played their cards right, they could get them both.
Yeah.
Because of the needs of some of the teams that are going to be drafting between number one and so forth. So that's what I would do, Pete. And then I'd go after a beast because they need a beast on defense. Their defense was not as good this year as it needed to be. And even when Justin put up points, like against Cleveland, they couldn't hold them off. So they need a beast on defense, whether it's a linebacker or D tackle or an edge rusher. And they're loaded with edge rushers this year.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you this, John, they already have the first pick, but they also have the 9th pick. And if they can get more picks after that trade from the first pick, which they would, but if they go down, I mean, they really could become very much what we saw happen this past year with Houston, right? Where all of a sudden the Texans have all these picks and they absolutely hit the home run, right? They have the offensive player and the defensive player, rookies of the year.
Yeah.
Unreal. I mean, so it can happen. And there's a heck of a lot of players out there. I'm with you on this Marvin Harrison. I'm not crazy about always going with the wide receiver or anything like that, but it makes sense, John, and here's why. The Vikings have had a lot of success with Justin Jefferson. Yeah. They haven't had to pay him. They're going to have to pay him soon. So at least you can stretch these draft picks, and that's why I like this whole thing is if you get this whole thing through the draft, think about it. You've got that rookie contract. You don't have to worry about the money. It's like San Francisco, Brock Purdy, right? He's making $850,000. So he isn't hurting the cap at all. As a matter of fact, he's probably one of their lowest paid guys practically. So it gives you a chance for a few years to kind of put this thing together, and maybe it goes together even faster. So I'm pretty excited for your Bears. I swear to God, I really am. I think that they have the opportunity like Houston did, and they already have their quarterback. So they just need to do other things, and it could be pretty special.
Yeah. Well, the Bears have a history of destroying quarterbacks, Pete.
Yeah.
And when you look at records for the Bears quarterbacks, they've got a guy here and there that have thrown for over 400 yards and so forth, like in one game kind of thing. But they don't have consistent, great quarterback play. This kid, Justin Fields, could be that guy. When you look at his size and speed and, how he can throw the ball, not just scramble, he could be one of, put him with Andy Reid in Kansas City. And I'm not saying he's better than Mahomes, but I'm saying he plays in a similar fashion, Pete, and he's got some mad skills. But let's just hope they don't destroy him. Well,
I'm glad you mentioned that, by the way. I'll just say real quick, Andy Reid is as big a part of this whole thing, John, in my opinion, he and the defensive coordinator, as much as Mahomes. And for the people who think that sounds crazy, they're crazy because he allows Mahomes to do what he does. And a lot of coaches don't do that. And the defensive coordinator, who just continues to stay in Kansas City, has done a magnificent job year after year after year, even though all the money's on the offensive side. Think about that. I mean, you're paying Kelsey, you're paying Mahomes, you're paying your running backs, you're paying the left tackle, the right tackle, all of that. And then on the defensive side, you kind of got to piece it all together. This guy has done an amazing job as well. So that's part of the dynasty. And if he walked away, he being Andy Reid, I think that would be a big, big hit to Kansas City.
Oh, it would. It absolutely would. But it is his life. I don't think he's walking away.
No.
Well, folks, thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the chatter. We will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You've been listening to The Rebel Edge. And if you'd like to get more input for your edification, by all means, grab that book. Go to itsnotanoption.com. That's itsnotanoption.com. Or, of course, you can see right there on the screen, marketrebellion.com/get started for more. We'll be back tomorrow at 1. See you then.